The standard process for designing any alien characters in the show would, of course, start with reading the script. We'd break down the script and come up with a list of characters that would be in that episode. Sometimes it would be a description that would give you some clues to the design elements that were necessary for the character, but that wasn't always necessarily the case.
There was two approaches we used. For the main characters, Kosh, Jakar, Delenn, others, I sat down and worked out not just who the character was, but what the world was like. And that informed their wardrobe as well, and also informed their culture. On guest characters, I often left it more vague, let John go off and play.
They would do, gosh, dozen quick sketches and come back and would say, yeah, this guy, this part feels okay, this, can you take those and put them together?
I think we always try to be sensitive to how the character fits into the context of the story. Obviously, if it's meant to be some threatening alien presence, you know, it should probably be kind of toothy and mean and crazy looking. And if it's benevolent, you might want something that's a little bit more, you know, not nicer looking and maybe more humanoid. That's generally the way you would go. Though oddly enough, dealing with Joe, who I think likes to sometimes present things in a way that you don't expect, you couldn't necessarily rely on that, because he might throw you a curveball and want a character that was meant to be nice and benevolent, maybe look evil up front, just so he could play off some twist in the character's story arc. So you had to really stay on your toes, especially with this, you know, with a screenwriter like Joe, who tends to be very imaginative.
You also have to bear in mind too that what you're looking at has to act with someone, and if it has tentacles and funny eyes, it may look good as a drawing, but how does it work as a character? There are many times John would have a great idea that I would look at and say, our guy has to talk to this and have a conversation with it, and I'm not sure that's going to work.
You know, we'd go in and maybe have a little mini discussion with Joe about where, you know, where he thought the kind of textures and qualities and emotional elements that he would want in the character, and then we'd go back to the drawing board and start again. And generally within 2-3 passes, we'd nail it down to something that was fairly close to the final product.
The gang at Optic Nerve were great. They were always there. They were always attentive to the needs of the actors, whether it was one of our main cast, or if it was somebody that was a day player or a guest cast, or even one of our background extras about the makeup.
At a guess, I would say we probably developed about 40 different species along the way, 10 primary and 30 secondary.
The Norns are willing to go into great danger, risk sacrificing themselves for you, knowing that in turn, we serve ourselves. If the symmetry were any more perfect, I should think one of us would break into tears.
The Narns we actually inherited from the pilot. I know one of my reactions was I felt that the spot patterns are a little bit too definite. They're like polka dots, and I kind of preferred this more kind of amphibian, like squiggly patterns. And if you look in the show, you do see Narns that tend to have different types of spots, which we chalked up to just ethnic variety within that singular race. And I feel like we really succeeded with the Narns in refining it and creating a design that's extremely elaborate, and yet still an actor's be able to kind of emote through.
I don't think you have any interest in restoring the glory of the Centauri Republic. I think you are using us as agents of chaos.
The Centauri race ultimately didn't require a whole lot of work from us. I mean, it was really just the elaborate peacock-like hair thing that Joe kind of devised, which is like a peacock. It's like the longer your hair, the higher your stature in the society and all that. Londo actually does wear a prosthetic forehead because we actually increased the depth of his forehead. And then as it went on, he did age, and we added some old age pieces and did augment the forehead to look more angry and mean as the character developed in that direction. It actually finding hairdressers that were really adept at being able to create that huge big peacock thing were actually probably more difficult than you would imagine. But other than that, I think really our major contribution to the Centauris would have been the women that are bald-headed, because there really wasn't that many actresses willing to come in and shave their head for the role. So, you know, we started off in the first season just using a traditional latex kind of thin balloon ball cap, and, you know, had varied levels of success. So we started coming up with these foam latex ball caps that had a higher level of quality, were easier to blend off and had more detail. And we kept adding, every year we kept adding 1 or 2 more molds to our stock of different sized ball heads for women.
The Council has lost its way. If it will not lead, if we have abandoned our covenant with Valen, the Council should be broken.
One of the things about the Minbari race that we had to work with was the fact that in the pilot they were they were a little bit more extensive makeups than what we ended up doing in the series. When we started coming up with like the military faction of the Minbari, we thought that they should maybe have more of a rough-hewn looking, texture to the horns. And in fact, you can see on some of them it gets more elaborate and horn-like, and we just thought that that was an indication of, like a deer or something, or a buck, where like the horns, the bigger they are, the more, aggressive they are, and they're like the alpha male. So that started to become an indicator of like their social ranking. And then the younger ones are kind of more smoother, and then the religious ones have a smoother kind of different look. What we decided was that the females would have the carved look, and in I think Joe's mythology of it all is that the women actually carve theirs down somehow. Some process like ornamentation, that they make their horns look more elaborate and design-wise, whereas the men have the rough-hewn ones and more natural, because they wouldn't necessarily go in that way, the same way women do makeup and men don't. So that became kind of this demarcation point.
You said you wanted to teach me to fight legends? Well, you're a legend too, and I am not going away until you agree.
Incorrect.
I always thought that Kosh was one of the more truly alien-looking forms, because you had no idea what it was like. It was just vaguely humanoid, just a head with like some shoulder thing. We did do some work on trying to refurbish it, but pretty much Kosh was the way he was in the pilot. And then we did have the Kosh 2, the other Kosh that we came up with. It was kind of fun to come up with a character that kind of already existed, that was that singular, and then come up with a variation. That was kind of fun, I thought. One of the fun things about the Vorlons was ultimately coming up with what they look like inside, and I really, really like Joe's take on it, that it's like each race kind of saw it relative to their own idea of whatever their god or spiritual, entities are, which I thought was really kind of an interesting take on it. Certainly a lot of thought and energy went into like trying to come up with those designs and make them look kind of ethereal and very interesting. Again, in a typical Joe fashion, just what you don't expect. You thought there'd be some kind of octopus, Cthulhu tentacle thing inside, and they're actually these very beautiful, elegant beings. One of the things that I find kind of amazing, having been a part of this, was the body of work that we managed to accomplish in 5 years. I think when you watch from episode to episode, you don't necessarily realize that, virtually each week we're doing one, maybe more new races, and the amount of design that entails. For the most part, we were doing original characters, virtually every episode. It's kind of a nice body of work to have been able to done, and just in conjunction with one project, it was pretty exciting.
I remember when they wheeled out Kosh to the stage in full paraphernalia for the first time. I had my picture taken with it, and the crew captured it. Which one is the Vorlon?